And so here's a beam of lumber that came out of the house, and you can see that this literally used to be a tree in the yard. They cut down a tree, just a junk tree, and they took in adze, and they used the adze to take off the bark and to square up the round log into a piece of lumber. Now this was probably done by a laborer, probably like a 14 to 17-year-old kid. A carpenter would not have done this. But after they squared this up with an adze, they drilled a hole in it right here with one of these hand drills right here, and this right here was a main beam going into the house. So if we cut this open, we should be able to see the growth rings, and that will give us an idea as to what the atmospheric conditions were like back in those days. I'm going to use sandpaper here to sand it all down so we can see the growth rings. I also have some of these old crude bricks here, which came from the same time period. These are very poor quality bricks. They're all misshapen, all coming apart, and it's fascinating to see that like this is how they built their houses. Crazy. Okay, so now I'm going to take the sandpaper, I'm going to sandpaper this and try to make it to where I can count all the growth rings. And we should be able to look back in time. We know that out here somewhere is 1846. So if we go in, we're going to go in 50, 60, 70 years. So alright, let's do it. Okay, the rings are starting to become more pronounced. Here's a 60 grit sandpaper. I'm going to continue to work on it. I'm using smaller and smaller grit, but the growth rings are really close together. You know, it's amazing. That's what I suspected, because there wasn't that much carbon in the air back then. So now I have 100 grit, which is finer than 60 grit. We may be able to go back into the 1700s. Alcohol. Oh yeah, looks good. So as it turns out, this tree right here is a black locust, which in modern day times, it's just a junk tree that grows in disturbed areas. It's firewood at best, but that's not what it was like back in 1849. Things were completely different. This was not junk wood back then. If you look at the growth rings, you know, and there's one ring for each year of growth, you can see that the growth rings on this old lumber, you know, are so close together compared to the modern day black locust. So it was a completely different tree back then. The growth rings being close together like that meant that, you know, the wood was strong, it was dense, and it was rot resistant. Compare that to the modern day black locust, it's not the same. The modern day black locust grows extremely fast. And so one explanation is that this is what trees were like before the Industrial Revolution. Yeah, and this tree goes back to, you know, the 1700s. There's 104, or, you know, give or take, growth rings on this. So this was a time where the air did not have as much carbon in it then as it does now. When you look back at the growth rings, you can kind of see this homeostasis that the Earth, you know, uses to balance the system out, right? And so, you know, the way that it works is whatever happens on the planet, you know, from, you know, in all of natural history, the Earth balances itself out. And so if there's more carbon in the atmosphere, the trees will use that carbon and create more cellulose, and they'll grow faster. If you look back, count the growth rings back, it looks like around the 1760s, there was a drought, like a 10-year drought. Interestingly, this middle right here, if my calculations are correct, this middle right here corresponds to the time when President George Washington, turned 18 years old. That's how old this tree is.